Welcome to HERstories. This is the series where we cover the lives of women that you probably haven't heard of. These are the women that are just footnotes against the lives of their men. And today we cover a child that was initially forgotten, lost in history and could have remained so if it wasn't for her painting. This is Bia de Medici, beloved and short-lived daughter of Cosimo de Medici, Duke of Tuscany. And this is her story.
Once upon a time in history.
Read the disclaimer. For audio listeners, this can be found in the description above sources and citations. Between 1536 and 1537, an unknown woman gave birth to a daughter, fathered by Cosimo de Medici, who was only 16 years old at the time. The woman's identity has remained a mystery, with the only source to her identity being Simon Fortuna, who wrote in his first years as Duke, had by a noblewoman of Florence a girl who was baptized in the name of his illustrious excellence, and called Bia, and the Lady Duchess, finding her in her home, was raising the girl lovingly as she was born to her husband before she became his wife. But as you will find out, this is not reliable. The girl's name Bia is also a little mystery. While some think it's simply her name, others have suggested that it is short for Bianca, meaning white and perhaps referenced in her portrait by her white dress. Others suggest it was a pet name, similar or derived from bambina, meaning little girl. Despite his age, evidence suggests that Cosimo adored his daughter, as did his mother Maria Salviati. In 1539, Bia, now aged 2 to 3 years old, gained a stepmother in the form of Eleanor of Toledo. Some historians state that Eleanor was a loving mother to Bia, but there is no sources contemporary to their lifetime that definitely confirms this. Though some have depicted Eleanor as the wicked stepmother, there is no 16th century sources for this. The image of Eleanor as a loving stepmother likely originates from late 19th century / early 20th century romanticism and sentimentalism, only further extended in the last 50 years from Janet Cox-Rearick's Dynasty and Destiny in Medici Art, where she concludes that Eleanor was a devoted mother based on commissioned artwork. It's worth noting that Cox-Rearick states to her own children, and Bia is unmentioned, suggesting some articles have romantic embellishment. Due to Bia's status as a natural child or bastard, it is unlikely that Bia was raised in the ducal court and is thought to have been raised in a separate household to her father's legitimate children, possibly under the guardianship of her grandmother Maria Salviati, suggested by household accounts. In her book Medici Women, Gabrielle Landon states, Bia was kept under the protection of the matriarch, not fully integrated into ducal court life, but not hidden either. And there is also this quote credited to Bia's grandmother. Bia was the comfort of our court, being so very affectionate. In her book, The Black Prince of Florence, historian Catherine Fletcher states that Cosimo assured excellent education for his children, both the legitimate and the illegitimate. Assuming Bia was included in this, she would have learnt to read and write, received religious education, music, and court etiquette. In Medici Women, Langdon suggests a friend for Bia. Around the same time as Bia's birth, Alessandro de Medici, cousin and ducal predecessor to Bia's father, also had an illegitimate child. Giulia's records are similar to Bia's in that we know she was raised away from the ducal court, and it's theorized that she was under the guardianship of Maria Salviati as her family matriarch after the passing of Alessandro and succession of Cosimo in 1537. as the girls were the same or close in age, this may have been a reason to household them together for care and educational purposes. Neither girl's tutor is recorded. A painting depicting Maria Salviati and a child together is one of the most attractive pieces of evidence for her involvement. The identification of the child is disputed, usually agreed to be Giulia, but some have argued that it actually depicts Bia, despite the child not resembling the Bronzino portrait of her. It's also worth noting that Cosimo himself has been suggested as the child. The child lacks resemblance to other notable children of the time, besides a young Alessandro de Medici, who was likely of mixed African and Italian descent, which the child's features also appear to be. Though this child's assumed identity is Giulia, it is thought to be the most compelling evidence of Bia's grandmother's involvement with the natural de Medici children. Unfortunately, in early 1542, Bia's health declined, thought to be due to plague or a fever, and she would pass away at around 5 years old. It is from this that we see evidence of her father's love for her. Bia was buried in the Medici burial site of San Lorenzo Basilica, unusual for illegitimate children, and her funeral service is reported to have been a solemn affair and conducted with a degree of formality not usual for people of her status. Cosimo didn't wish to forget his child, commissioning for a plaster death mask to be made of her, its existence verified by the Royal Garderobe Inventory in 1553. Bia's famous painting by Agnolo Bronzino is thought to be posthumous, with a death mask used for her likeness. All this has brought historians to the conclusion that Cosimo had a great love for his firstborn child, enough that he wanted her immortalized and her image unforgotten. Unfortunately, for several hundred years, the painting was misidentified as Maria de Medici, Cosimo's eldest legitimate daughter. For that time, it was thought Bia was Maria's nickname. Comparing Bia's portrait with another depicting adult Maria, it's clear how this presumption began, as the half-sisters have a striking resemblance. It wasn't until 1893 that historian Cosimo Conti found evidence for the existence of Bia herself, though the portrait continued to be identified as Maria until the 1950s, and some historians still dispute the new identification of Bia, along with the child depicted with Maria Salviati. Bia's portrait has become a moving symbol of parental love and grief, and a small reminder that we are always only one discovery away from our view of history being reshaped. Thanks for staying to hear about Bia, lest she be forgotten again. And an even bigger thank you for making it through my strange pronunciations. I do have chronic issues when it comes to speaking, which is one of the reasons I wanted to do this channel. It really does help me improve. Support the channel by dropping a like and maybe give me just a little comment, a little bit of encouragement. And subscribe if you want to hear more stories from women in history. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time, in another time in history.